It had been a hot summer. I sat in my stuffy office, the fan stirring the heavy air uselessly, and thought about how Emily had gone to the cottage after our fight. A week had passed, and something inside me was gnawing at me, urging me to check on her. And it wasn't just guilt over our last fight, but a growing sense of unease, a quiet but insistent whisper that something was wrong. The empty space next to me in bed grew colder each night, and the silence during our phone conversations grew heavier. My heart carried a strange mixture of anxiety and longing that I couldn't ignore. 7 years together was not a short time, and although her irascible, stand-up character often clashed with mine, it was part of what I loved about her. Lately, however, our life had become monotonous. We were fighting more and more often. I was constantly late at work, consumed by deadlines, and she was spending more and more time with her girlfriends. Everyday life dulled the spark between us. The romance was gone, but I convinced myself that the love was still there, even though I wasn't entirely sure. The road out of town was surprisingly clear, as if the universe itself wanted to make it easy for me. I drove down the highway with the radio playing soft tunes and tried to imagine us making up. On a whim, I stopped by the flower store and bought her favorite peonies, their soft pink petals already slightly wilted from the summer heat. They had always been her colors, a reminder of our first days together, when I would surprise her with a fresh bouquet after a long week. She once told me that peonies symbolize perseverance and love, qualities that she believes define us. Holding them now, I wondered if their fading beauty reflected the state of our relationship, which was suffering under the weight of neglect and time. At the liquor store, I found a bottle of the same wine we had toasted to on our wedding day. As I walked on, memories of our first meeting swarmed in my mind. It was a rainy evening in a quaint bookstore. She was browsing romance novels and I was on the hunt for technical manuals. Our chance encounter was the beginning of everything. But as I turned onto the gravel road leading to the cottage, anxiety settled in me. My chest tightened as I spotted the sleek black beam parked at the gate. Thoughts flashed through my mind. What was Richard doing here? Was this a coincidence or something more deliberate? A strange mixture of suspicion and fear swept over me, the kind that gnaws at you when, deep down, you already know the answer but don't want to face it. I gripped the steering wheel for another moment, trying to calm myself before I got out of the car. I knew this car. It belonged to Richard, a mutual acquaintance of ours. He exuded charm and confidence, was the kind of man who effortlessly attracted people to him. A successful businessman, a longtime bachelor despite 3 failed marriages, and a man notorious for his antics. His latest scandal involved the theft of a business partner's wife, which destroyed both family and partnership in one fell swoop. The gate was ajar and creaked softly as I pushed it open. The lilac bushes that lined the walkway were in bloom, their fragrance almost overwhelming. Emily had planted them last spring, excitedly telling me how they would beautify the garden. I remembered her joy when the first flowers appeared, how she filled all the vases in the house with their fragrant bunches. From the open window of the veranda came soft music, a familiar tune. It was our song, the one we had danced to at the wedding. The melody, once filled with promise, now seemed ghostly. The house was cool, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee in the air. There were 2 glasses and an open bottle of martini on the dining room table. Emily had always disliked martinis, saying they gave her a headache. A pair of Italian loafers lay haphazardly lying next to the stairs leading to the 2nd floor. Richard's loafers. I recognized his penchant for showing off his impeccable taste. I walked slowly up the stairs. Each step groaned under my weight, and the sound added to the anxiety that bubbled inside me. We'd built these stairs together, painstakingly selecting each board and sanding them to perfection. The door to the bedroom was slightly ajar, sunlight streaming through, illuminating the clothes scattered on the floor. They hadn't even noticed me enter. Emily was sitting on the edge of the bed, her fiery red hair cascading over her shoulders. For a moment, the sight struck me like a physical blow, and the air left my lungs. My thoughts scattered. Was she thinking of me as she sat there? Or was I just another piece of furniture in her world? Her pose, so familiar and yet so distant, carried an unsettling calm that contradicted the chaos unfolding inside me. All the memories we'd made together seemed to blur and scatter, leaving behind an unbearable clarity of what this moment really meant. Richard leaned over, his lips touching the strands I'd once loved to run my fingers through. On the nightstand was a photograph from our wedding day, capturing my youthful grin and unbridled happiness. Now, standing in the doorway and clutching the peonies in my hands, I felt a strange emptiness. There was no anger, no jealousy. Just an all-consuming emptiness, as if I were watching strangers play out a tragedy I'd already come to terms with. Emily saw me first. She cried out sharply and began pulling the sheet over her. Richard turned leisurely, a smug smile playing on his lips. "Would you care to join us?" he asked, a sneer in his voice. He was a man used to getting what he wanted, and his arrogance was almost palpable. I silently placed the flowers on the dresser, pulled out my phone, and snapped a few pictures. "For the trial," I said flatly. Emily stuttered as she tried to explain, her voice a cacophony of excuses and pleading. I wasn't listening. My feet carried me down the stairs, each step seeming heavier than the last. Thunder rumbled in the distance, the sky darkening with the approaching storm. The heavy clouds reflected the confusion in my chest, each roll of thunder reflecting the unspoken anguish and finality I felt. It was as if nature itself was mourning the collapse of everything I held dear, preparing to wash away not only the physical remnants of the day, but also the emotional wreckage left behind. Nature seemed ready to cleanse everything, a symbolic washing away of the old and broken. A month later, the trial was quick and drama-free. Emily didn't contest anything. Perhaps guilt surfaced, or maybe Richard had made her grandiose promises. After the hearing, she tried to approach me, her eyes full of regret, but I walked past her without a word. 6 months later, I met Richard at the supermarket. He was a shadow of his former self, his once flawless image now disheveled and haggard. Rumor had it that Emily had left him for a younger man, a fitness trainer, just 2 months after our divorce was finalized. The irony was poetic. The man who had thrived by taking from others now found himself abandoned. I walked past him without paying attention. My cart was filled with groceries for 2. At home, Alana was waiting for me. She was the woman who had shown me what love built on mutual respect and kindness could be. And the lilacs at the cottage. They still bloom every spring, a vivid reminder of how fragile yet long-lasting the beauty of life can be when carefully nurtured.